Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak with you today. I want to spend a few moments to talk about Ireland's new Waste Action Plan for a Circular Economy, which was launched by Minister Eamon Ryan on the 4th of September last. So firstly, I'd like to talk to you about the policy context for the plan and why it's appearing at this kind of critical time. So our existing waste policy, a resource opportunity, covered the period from 2012 to 2020. So of necessity, with the expiration of that policy, it is time for us to introduce a new waste action plan or a new waste policy. This also comes on the heels of the Climate Action Plan, which was published in July 2019, and that contained a commitment to develop a new waste policy in 2020. We're also working in the context of the EU Circular Economy Action Plan. So the measures agreed in 2018 are now entering into force, and the publication of our new Waste Action Plan is aligned with our transposition of that first circular economy legislative package. We also have, from earlier this year, the European Green Deal, which includes a commitment for a second circular economy action plan, and was launched in March 2020. Linked with that then is the publication of the Commission's proposals for Next Generation EU, which includes a very ambitious recovery and resilience fund, focusing on supporting recovery across all member states, but with a particular focus on those national plans that contain policies or projects that support the digital and green transformations. So this document needs to be seen very much in that context also. We're also all working within the context of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the recently published Programme for Government, Our Shared Future, also contains a commitment to introduce a waste action plan and a circular economy strategy very soon within the life of the government. Just to talk a little bit about process, we've had a very strong emphasis on stakeholder engagement from the outset. So then Minister Richard Bruton launched a stakeholder engagement process in September 2018, which was kind of based around a stakeholder forum, a plenary session with then breakout workshops held in the Irish Management Institute. We used the feedback from that session to develop a consultation document, which issued in December 2019 with a consultation period open until February 2020. We were delighted to receive around 280 submissions from a wide range of different organizations, individual members of the public, NGOs, consumer groups. And then earlier this year, we established a waste advisory group, and this was established to provide cross-sectoral input to developing the plan and to provide a platform in which to test, review and refine ideas. But it was also around harnessing the capabilities and the expertise of the different bodies that were around the table with us. So we did actually sit around the table twice as a group. I think there were around 40 or 50 members who attended those in-person meetings. And then with the onset of the COVID-19 restrictions, we had to change the way we progressed the business of that group. And actually, we used that very well because it gave us an opportunity to accelerate the process of our engagement with the Waste Advisory Group. So instead of having in-person meetings, maybe every 4 or 6 weeks, we started to have weekly meetings. And the full membership and meeting papers and minutes of the group are available on the department's website. And what we tried to do at each of those meetings was to have a single agenda item, or sometimes two, but really to try and devote 2 or 3 hours to look at a single issue and to really to drill into it and to get as many views as possible and suggestions from the members of the advisory group. So we looked at things like food waste, broad issue of the circular economy, how to ensure citizen engagement, enforcement, plastics, single-use plastics in particular, and a deposit return scheme. So we found this a really, really useful exercise, and hopefully the members of the group did. And again, when we were having the virtual meetings, we had up to 60 participants at some stages. So that was really encouraging for us. And we want to use the goodwill and the energy that we've built up in that group by continuing it in some form into the implementation stage of the plan, which would be of assistance to us, because the plan is not just a government plan, it's everybody has ownership of this. The plan itself then is very much an action-focused plan that we think will place Ireland at the vanguard of EU performance. At the moment, we're already achieving, or we're on course to achieve, all of our EU targets, but we see this as a plan that will enable us to set ourselves apart from other member states. It contains a range of 200 short, medium and long-term actions, and they range in scale from the very, very significant to some minor tweaking. Many of them are quite significant though, and quite radical. Some can be implemented immediately, others will require supporting legislation, primary or secondary, and there will be a waste management circular economy bill published later this year. The heads of the bill will be published later this year. Just to talk about some of the overarching objectives of the plan, a key focus in the plan, and this is probably the most important thing, and the thing that really separates it from previous waste plans, is that we want to shift the focus away from what do we do with the waste that we produce to how do we change the way things are produced? How do we design out waste at the earliest possible stage? How do we encourage producers to make better products? And how do we better inform consumers to make the right sort of choices that will help the bottom line for them and reduce costs in terms of the products that they buy, but also in terms of the waste management costs as well. So we want to shift the focus away from waste disposal and treatment to ensure that materials and products remain in productive use for longer, preventing waste and supporting reuse through a policy framework that discourages the wasting of resources and rewards circularity. A second critical point is that we want to make producers who manufacture and sell disposable goods for profit environmentally accountable for the products they place on the market. So this is not an action plan that goes after the consumer or that pins all of the actions on the consumer at that point. It's about making producers accountable and making them responsible for the products that they place on the market. We also want to ensure that measures support sustainable economic models. So, for example, by supporting the use of recycled over virgin materials, and you'll see a strong emphasis on that in the plan too. I mentioned the need for us to harness the goodwill and the expertise of the Waste Advisory Group, and that's also something we want to continue into the implementation phase of the plan. We want to harness the reach and the influence of all sectors, including the voluntary sector, research and development, producers, manufacturers, regulatory bodies, civic society, elected representatives, everybody. And then we want to support clear and robust institutional arrangements for the waste sector, including through a strengthened role for local authorities. So, picking out some of the headline actions in the plan, we will be making collectors responsible for target attainment of our EU objectives as a condition of collection permits. So this is critical. It automatically will mean that collectors and the state's objectives and ambitions are fully aligned. We will also introduce a deposit and return scheme, and the timeframe for that is set out in the action plan. So we will be going to public consultation in the autumn on a number of possible models for a deposit and return scheme. So we're not asking the question, is this something that we should do? That's a commitment that's already contained in the programme for government. It's reflected in the action plan. So the question now is, what's the best model for doing that? And we intend to have the legislation in place to allow for the establishment of a deposit and return scheme. The legislation will be in place from the middle of next year. We also look at the possibility of introducing economic instruments. So again, public consultations late last year on the introduction of a recovery levy and an increase in the landfill levy. We'll be following up on that. And then the introduction of a latte levy. And this is intended to be a precursor to an eventual ban on disposable coffee cups. And this will be, I think, particularly innovative. I think Ireland will be potentially the first country in the world to go for a ban on disposable coffee cups. And then we're also committing to the Waste Action Plan as being a precursor to a whole of government circular economy strategy, which we will see, we'll publish later this year. Going into a little bit more detail then around some of the measures in terms of actions that will impact on households and businesses. So collectors will have that responsibility for target attainment, which will mean that it will be for the industry to look at how to encourage people to use the segregated bin system more effectively. So we know that there's a huge amount of waste, particularly in the commercial sector, that is going into the residual bin, or the black bin, so-called. And we need to find ways to get that material out of the black bin and into either the recycling bin or the organic or the food waste bins. We're also setting out a roadmap for standardized bin colors across the state: black for residual, green for recycling, and brown for organic waste. We will be introducing the recovery levy that I mentioned from the middle of next year is the intention, along with an increase of a commensurate increase in the landfill levy. We will be passing on responsibility, we will be giving responsibility to the National Waste Collection Permit Office to become a consumer complaints body, as well as their existing role, which is central to the overall operation of the collection market. And a theme that applies across the board in the plan is the need to educate and raise awareness around the need to improve our waste segregation and what the benefits of the transition to the circular economy are. So education and awareness is fundamental. It's almost the first step under any of the chapters. In terms of food waste, we have a commitment to halve our food waste by 2030. We have a number of commitments around the sustainable food waste management options for homes and businesses, and waste segregation infrastructure for apartment dwellers. Now, we've seen in some of the initial reaction to the plan that there have been claims that it is about increasing costs for food and increasing the cost of cheap clothing. It is not. It's important for me to dispel that at this stage. There were a couple of reports about the content of the plan, which were unfortunately a little bit misleading. So it's very important for us to kind of nail that and to ensure that people are clear on exactly what the plan is saying. So we know that the use of buy one get one free type offers or multi-buy packaging can have a significant impact on the quantity of food waste that's produced. So, for example, while spoiled food or food that has gone by its use-by date is the main reason for wasted food, promotional mechanics and consumers being tempted by buy one get one free offers is the cause of approximately 30% of food waste generation. So the action plan contains a commitment to work with retailers to end the sale of multi-buy packs, particularly perishable goods, to prevent overbuying, to reduce food and packaging waste, and to actually save money for consumers. So instead of buy one get one free, we'd be encouraging discounting. Now, obviously, any such measures need to be carefully calibrated to ensure that they don't impact on lower income households for those who fully use multi-buy offers to feed their families. So this is not a plan that is intended to raise the cost of food. It's about reducing food waste. And reducing food waste can also reduce the cost of waste management for households. So it needs to be viewed holistically. In terms of plastic packaging and single-use plastics, the deposit and return scheme for plastic bottles and aluminium cans is something I've already spoken about. We will also be introducing the single-use plastic bans that are required under the Single-Use Plastics Directive, so cotton bud sticks, cutlery, plates, stirrers, chopsticks. But we also want to look beyond this to see what are the other single-use plastics that potentially be prohibited or banned in Ireland, and we want to reduce the number of single-use plastics being placed on the market by 2026. The initial focus, as I say, is on those single-use plastics that we're required to ban under the directive, but we are prepared to look further. Extended producer responsibility has been very effective in Ireland in terms of improving our overall waste performance. So we have a number of really strong commitments here. And this is an example of one of those areas where we're really focusing on production and not just on the consumer, but how do we design stuff better? How do we inform people better around what is in the things that they use and that they buy? So first commitment that I mentioned there, the mandatory EPR for all packaging producers before the 2024 EU deadline. We are also ending the option for self-compliance. Producers will be liable for eco-modulation of fees, and all packaging will be reusable or recyclable by 2030. Construction and demolition, we produce a huge amount of construction and demolition waste. Much of it is soil and stone, much of it potentially reusable. So we're looking to revise the 2006 best practice guidelines for C&D waste. We want to streamline byproduct notification and end of waste decision-making processes to ensure that reusable materials are brought back into productive reuse as quickly and as in as streamlined a way as possible. And instead of focusing on single operator end of waste applications, we want to develop national end of waste applications for priority waste streams through a working group. Textiles is this is another area that has been somewhat misconstrued over the early coverage of the action plan. So again, we're not intending here to increase the cost of clothing. We're not going after cheap clothing. Some families rely on low cost clothing to clothe their families, and there's nothing in the plan that will actually impact on that. But it's very important that we see the clear difference between cheap clothes and fast fashion, which, as the name suggests, is specifically about accelerating retail and trend cycles so that producers can produce more, retailers can sell more, and people buy more. So fast fashion is not about discounted clothing for families under pressure. It's about maximizing turnover and therefore disposability of clothing, low, medium, and high cost clothing. At the moment, only 1% of our textiles globally are recycled. And in Ireland, we're sending 63,000 tons of textiles to landfill every year. This is a massive loss of resource value. We're disposing so much potentially recyclable, reusable material that has used up significant resources in its manufacture, whether in terms of water, materials, transportation, land use. So, as in pretty much all areas of the plan, the chapter on textiles sets out a range of complementary commitments that focus firstly on education and awareness. So working with the public, with retailers and producers to raise awareness around the impacts of production and consumption of textiles. Then on improving data on textile waste, better regulating how clothes banks operate, and promoting better design. It also commits to the establishment of a textile action group that will look at how we can capitalize on the value of textiles in Ireland, including reuse and preparation for use, and also recycling. We'll also look at options to improve future circularity in textiles, including the potential for introducing extended producer responsibility schemes for textiles. Another measure aimed squarely at producers but unfortunately not picked up on in the coverage of the plan. And then over the medium to long term, we will examine the potential role of economic instruments on fast fashion, which could also support high value indigenous producers by reducing the cost differential for them. So that sort of nuance, unfortunately, was missed. So the Textile Action Group will be a critical vehicle for examining those longer term options. Moving then to treatment, we will review state support for the development of recycling infrastructure. We have a strong focus in the plan on how we can support the development of indigenous treatment capacity and secure the resource potential in Ireland. We will examine legislation and procedures for development of waste management infrastructure and standardized waste streams accepted at civic community sites. Whirlers have been extremely effective in improving our enforcement performance, and we will look to expand the role of whirlers to address priority waste enforcement challenges. Unauthorized sites action plan was another commitment, and an anti-dumping toolkit, fixed penalty notices for breaches of waste law, because these have been quite successful. And then critically, government leadership on circular economy, and picking up on the commitment in the programme for government around the establishment of a circular economy unit within government. It will be within our department. It will be in the same area, the same sector of the department as has responsibility for the waste action plan. And we're committing to a high level all of government circular economy strategy, the inclusion of green criteria and circular economy principles in all public procurement. We will develop circular economy roadmaps and explore how Ireland's digital sector can transition to a circular economy. Any questions? I'd be more than happy to answer them if you could put them through via the conference app. Thank you very much for your attention.